Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my June wrap-up. I don't know about you guys, but June was an incredibly busy month for me, so it felt like it was more like a year long than actually a month long because so much stuff was going on. It was the combination of it felt like it was a long time and also felt like it barely took any time at all, but because of this, I feel like the books I read at the beginning of the month, I actually read like a year ago. It's felt like it's been a long time. Also, I've done reviews for nearly all of these books, so this should be a very quick wrap-up. The first book that I read this month was The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh, and this is the second book in the Wrath and the Dawn duology, and I absolutely adored it. I love this duology. I think it's one of the best completed series. It just feels like one giant book, and it's just as good as the first book because I really loved the first book, and I really loved this one, and I have a lot of thoughts and emotions about it. I love the characters, I love the relationship because it's very equal, and Renee did a really good job of tying up any loose ends and making the finale good and complete and wonderful, and I miss these characters, but I don't feel like I missed anything with the finale, so it was great. 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. This book has been very controversial and talked about since the movie came out, and I wanted to read this book before the movie, so I read this and then immediately watched the movie, and I actually have a whole 2 videos on it with discussion on the movie and the book, which I will link on the screen, but this one was so hyped, I think, that I didn't end up loving it as much as a lot of people did. I felt like a lot of the romance elements were lacking. Whenever I hear about this, it's very much talked about as a romance, so that might just be the reviews I'm watching or like the marketing especially since the movie came out. So I was expecting more from the romance element of it, and that's why I read it, was because I wanted like a very nice romance, and I didn't really get that. And then also I found a lot of things about like the tragedy very predictable and stuff, and it's a book about a disabled individual that's written in an ableist way, so that's problematic. There are some things I liked about it too. I found it very compulsively readable. I read it in a very short span of time, and I also really liked the majority of the characters and how real they were, but ultimately I ended up enjoying the movie more than the book, so I gave the book 3 out of 5 stars. Then was the beginning of Tome Topple. For those of you that don't know, Tome Topple is a readathon that I created, and it focuses around big books over 500 pages. I want to thank all of you that participated in it. It was a really fun time. I had a lot of wonderful co-hosts who helped run sprints and stuff, so it was amazing. Everyone had a great time, and I ended up reading 2 books during the 2 weeks, which is awesome. That was my goal, pretty much, was to read 2 books, and I'm really excited about that. So, again, thank you all for joining me for Tome Topple, and the next round of Tome Topple will be in September. If you want to be one of the first people to get updates about when Tome Topple will officially be happening in September, I will leave the link to the Twitter down below, so you can go follow us there and get all the updates ASAP. So the first book that I read for Tome Topple was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy, the original trilogy, because now there's a continuation trilogy that's going on currently, if isn't already just finished, I forget. But I've been meaning to read this book forever, and Tome Topple was my perfect excuse. I wanted to finish the Mistborn trilogy potentially, but at least minimum read this book, and I did. And I thought this was a really excellent second book. It takes place a year after the first book, which is kind of nice because I read the first book about a year ago, so it was kind of good for me installing with that whole element to it. But I enjoyed the second book. When I was reading it, I found that it was slower, and it is a slower book, but there's a lot of political stuff going on, which is a new element because I feel like the first book didn't have a lot of that. But this book had a lot of those political intrigue things. It also had a lot of character development and finding out different backstories, and this book kind of feels like it's starting out a second story that's different from the first book, because the first book is more focused on like this heist situation, kind of Ocean's 11-y in a fantasy world, and this book is building up this new thing, and it's so good. I wasn't super convinced at first because I loved the first book so much, so through most of this book I was like, this is a 4-star book completely, da-da-da-da-da, and I still end up giving it 4 stars because the majority of the book I feel like is a 4-star book. Still really good, but wasn't 5 stars. But that ending, though, is amazing. I'm not going to say anything about it, obviously. It's just a really intense, wonderful ending because Brandon Sanderson is the king of endings, and it was awesome. So the ending of this book and the continuation into the next book, 5 out of 5 stars, but overall 4 out of 5 stars, but I really love it, and I can't wait to read the last book, which is going to be happening in July. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I need to have it happen in July, and then I can read more Cosmere stuff and just enjoy all of it. Again, I did a full review on this, which I will link on the screen. You may be hearing my puppy barking in the background because she's in her little pen. Not a crate, she's in her pen. You know, she has plenty of room in there, and she's really upset that everyone's ignoring her because we're doing stuff right now. So I might have to go grab her in a second because she's being a little whiny baby. Little whiny baby. The next book that I picked up was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Now, as many of you guys may know, I really hated A Court of Thorns and Roses. I absolutely hated it. I only really liked the last little bit of that book, so ultimately last year I gave it 2 stars. I didn't like it. I will leave the link to the review for it down below that I did, but I was not a fan. So this book I begrudgingly picked up for a couple of reasons. One, it was our random read-alongs group book for the month. So Kristen from What's Happening, Sarah Jane from The Book Life, and I have a read-along group called Random Read-alongs where we will sometimes randomly read books together and everyone else joins in. We have a live show and everything. So we decided back in May that this was our book for random read-alongs, so we read ACOTAR together last year. So I picked it up for that reason, and also because this was rumored to have Hades and Persephone elements in it, and as you guys know, because I say it pretty much every video, I am Hades Persephone trash. So I had to pick this up. Begrudgingly, I didn't want to necessarily, I wouldn't have continued with the series, and I loved it. I have already done a full review and gush on this book, which I will link on the screen if you want to hear all my in-depth thoughts, because I really shouldn't get into any of it in here because I'll just keep going on just a gush about it. But I loved this book. It was my aesthetic. It was completely different from the first book, which is actually one of the things I have a problem with this book, because this book by itself, separate from all of Sarah J. Maas's other work, is amazing and beautiful and wonderful and like 5 stars to me. But connected to her other stuff and connected to ACOTAR, it's not. So I don't like the transition between the first book and the second book. I don't like some of the character development choices that Sarah J. Maas continues to make. I have a lot of issues with stuff surrounding that, but if you pull that out of it, I love this book and everything about it. So like I said, in my heart, it's like a 5 out of 5 star book and I love it. And it's one of my favorite books of this year, but it is a 4 out of 5 star book. I rated it 4 stars because there are issues that I have with like the writing and the transition and stuff like that. But if I separate it from everything else, it's wonderful and I love it. We are actually doing a live show discussion of this book tomorrow, Sunday, July 3rd at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on my channel. So if you want to discuss everything with us, whether you loved it or hated it, because the other 2 girls are still reading it, so I don't know their opinions yet, but if you want all the discussions and all the like gushing or maybe griping or everything about it and you want to talk with us, definitely join us for a live show and we'll chat and it'll be awesome. And the last book that I read this month is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This is a book I read for another read along, which I am doing with Kayla of Bookadoodles. We have a Goodreads group down below. I will link it, and we are reading every book in the Magicians trilogy this summer. So this month was obviously The Magicians. We're discussing it in the Goodreads group, and then at the very end of the summer we're doing a live show discussing the entire series. So if you want to join us for that, you can do that, and the hashtag for it if you want to talk with us on Twitter is Magician16. But anyway, this is the first book in the Magicians trilogy, and it follows our main character of Quentin, who is a very sad kind of overachiever character, and he is obsessed with this series of books called Fillory, which is kind of like an amalgamation of like Narnia, kind of with Harry Potter. Basically, it's a very kind of stereotypical sounding fantasy series, and he's obsessed with this, but he eventually finds out that magic is real, and he ends up going to a magical college. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of relating this to Harry Potter and saying that it's Harry Potter for adults. It's not. This is a completely different series than Harry Potter for adults. Thankfully, I knew that before going into this. I actually knew that this had very mixed reviews, that people either love it or hate it, and that the characters in it are very unlikable, and all of that is true. They are very normally flawed human beings that make really bad decisions half of the time, and it takes a lot of tropes and twist them on its head, and it messes with your expectations. I actually have a review coming up for this on Monday because I can't even fully explain my thoughts for this. I think this book is incredibly clever, and like I said, it messes with your expectations, so it leaves you feeling kind of unsettled when you read it. It also has this like weird pacing thing that it does because again, it messes with your expectations. So you can't really go into this book with any expectations, but if you're a fantasy reader at all, you already have those expectations in your mind, so it leaves you with a really weird reading experience. The majority of this book, I really wasn't enjoying myself necessarily. I didn't hate it and I didn't love it, so I couldn't find myself motivated to read it. And because of that, I ended up giving this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. But not because it's a bad book, just because I can't rate a book 4 or 5 stars if I don't really actively enjoy reading it. But I think this is a really good book to discuss with people, and I think ultimately, and I could already tell from reading this book, that this is a series that you have to read and review as a whole, and it's very hard to review it just book by book because I can already tell that there's things that after I read the series, I'm going to be able to go back and see stuff and see how it's all kind of connected and stuff. So I am going to be doing reviews for each individual book, but I also know that like I'm going to continue with the series, and it's going to be like a whole big thing at the end. So 2.5 out of 5 stars based on the enjoyment of this book, but a very enjoyable book for discussions and will most likely be a very good series. So those are all the books that I read in June. Comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!